Welcome to Resilience in Life and Leadership with your host, Stephanie Olson. I'm excited about my next guest that I've worked with several times, Dr. Sabrina Kuhn. Dr. Sabrina Kuhn has worked in quality for the last 15 plus years in a managed care environment, the provider community, and city government. She has spent 7 plus years in public health and the last 25 years in behavioral health. She has worked in every level of care from state hospital to owning a private practice. She has received her doctorate in counseling psychology from Temple University, and in her spare time, she enjoys traveling, live music, and her biggest joy is spending time with her 6-year-old son. Welcome, Sabrina. Hello, and welcome to the Being Resilient podcast. And I'm so excited to have Dr. Kuhn here with us. Sabrina, welcome.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me today. Hello to your fan base and your listeners. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, this is not our first time on screen together.
It is not.
So we started working together through a company called Elevate that has speakers and all the things. And we had the great pleasure to meet each other and work together. And I'm just so excited to be doing this today. So
yes,
there will be more of this is what I'm trying to say. You'll see more of us.
Yes, get ready. Get
ready. All right. Well, Sabrina, tell us a little bit about your story. We're talking about resilience, and I know that you have not only a lot of stories yourself, but you've got experience in dealing with people and with boundaries and resilience and trauma and all of those things.
All of the above.
Yeah.
You know, how can you not have those stories? I think as a Black woman growing up in America as the youngest child to a powerful set of parents who raised you collectively before it was a trend. My parents were divorced when I was pretty young, I think around 6 years old. However, they were amicable for the most part during the time of rearing me. But I'll tell you that resiliency, I think, kind of ran in the blood of my family from the beginning. Again, I had, very trailblazing parents, people that were the first a lot of times in their field. My father was the first Black firefighter to integrate his firehouse in Washington, D.C. in the 60s.
That's fantastic.
So, I mean, and one of the stories I remember significantly about him, which will be quick, was that everything that he touched in the firehouse, they threw away, including dishes, sheets, pillows, towels. I mean, because at the time that he was a firefighter, you slept in the firehouse for 4 days, and then you were off for 4 days. And depending on what was going on, it could be longer periods of time, but you slept there as a collective unit. You don't see that happening as much anymore.
Yeah.
So because he was the first person in his firehouse, they were not told or informed that he was not a white male, because that was the expectation. So when they saw him, they really treated him very much like an animal, for lack of a better way to say it. However, my father, being who he was, quickly won them over. And those people, they later became lifelong friends.
Wow.
So really interesting. And then my mother was the first Black woman to lead a very large department store chain in the Washington, D.C. area. They since were taken over and bought by Macy's as we know it.
Okay.
But the parent company of Macy's owned the same department store. And then she worked in the field of finance. So she oftentimes was the only woman, period, and then the only Black woman in the room for these major financial discussions. And she was the Me Too movement before the Me Too movement, as far as the amount of sexual harassment
Oh,
and racial discrimination. In fact, she did sue the Washington, D.C. government for discrimination in 1980, and it took 10 years, but she did win.
wow.
Uh,
10 years.
it took 10 years to resolve the case,
Unbelievable.
but she
Wow. Good
did, in
for
fact,
her. Good
win.
for her.
Yes, to even stand up and manage it
Yes.
that long. Um, so again, born of resiliency.
Yeah.
Skipping ahead to me, who they left here as they both have transitioned.
Mm.
I am left now to be the next force to be reckoned with, is
Yeah.
like
And
how I
you
like to,
are. Yes, you are.
that's how I like to refer to myself.
I love
So
that.
when you asked me to come on the show, Stephanie, one of the things that I thought about was, well, what story will I tell? And I probably significant to kind of tell this one story that kind of prompted my move to Texas. And I think it was just because it was pretty monumental. So at the time, I had went to work for a pretty large public health provider. I won't say give many details just to keep the confidentiality of the organization because they still are alive and productive
Sure.
today. But I went to work for this large organization. They had probably somewhere around close to 1,000 employees, which is pretty large for a public health entity
Yeah.
at the time where I was living. And loved the work. I went to work for this woman who had been a pillar in the community. She had been working at that establishment for 35 years.
Mm.
She was a Black woman, the first kind of executive in that
Yeah.
organization. And when I joined the organization, I joined under the guidelines that I would be her replacement.
Mm.
Well, here's the challenge with that. Um, she didn't know that I was going to be her
Oh,
replacement.
yeah.
So
Communication is key. Yeah.
and it's a bit of a, unsettling feeling to
Yeah.
know that um, you're going to replace someone that doesn't know.
Right.
And I didn't know that she didn't know
Ugh.
until after I started the role. So
Oh, that's awful.
awkward.
Yeah. That puts you in a really bad position.
Especially
Jeez.
when I threw out a few references to her about, obviously I'm here, I'm going to try to pick your brain and learn everything that you know. And she's kind of looking at me like, I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, jeez.
And she sort of meant it.
Oh,
So 3 years later, she was still at the head.
wow.
And that's when the organization, I think, got pretty tired of her
Mm.
and decided to create what a lot of companies do when they don't want to manage effectively is they create these kind of pressures within the organization to downsize or
Yeah.
restructure
Right.
as it's referred to, and in her case offer early retirement.
Mm. Mhm.
So did I mention that none of these things was she interested in, not even
Oh,
early retirement? So she thought to herself and even said to me, I wonder who will take the package.
oh,
And I'm
jeez.
thinking, the
The
package
package is
is meant,
created for
it is
you.
for you, right?
That's right.
So at this,
Oh,
we're talking about 3 years later, I figured out pretty quickly kind of how to handle her. And so I said, oh, well, I guess we'll see. I mean, I couldn't say much more than that.
right.
So eventually she was strong armed into leaving the role. And so after that, I was supposed to ascend into her role, yet that didn't happen.
You're
There
kidding.
was no real communication. There was not a lot of, um, people willing to speak to that.
Mm.
And then suddenly, within a few weeks, I got a new boss. And I'm
No.
thinking,
Oh,
I thought this was going to be my role.
wow.
So again, no communication. And I think, sometimes as an employee of a large institution, you have to begin to read the writing on the walls.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think for me, I didn't quite do that. I was still naive. I
Right.
still believed that people would be honest about what their intentions
Yeah.
were.
Exactly.
And I still, kind of believed or had faith in people would keep their promises at
Silly
work.
you.
I know. I had to learn the hard way. So after that, um, this next person that came to work there as my new leader, she was also a Black woman, very different kind of leader. She was, I won't say significantly younger, but maybe 10 years younger than my prior leader, but very experienced,
Wow.
very seasoned. She had worked for a lot of different large institutions. She had the same credentials as my previous leader. But I'll tell you, you could tell that she was a lifelong learner, where my
Mm,
previous leader, not so much. So she came in and immediately transformed our
wow.
department.
Wow.
And she was a teaching type of leader. So
Wow.
she saw very quickly that I did not have the skill set, probably that was appropriate to ascend into that
Okay.
position anyway. Of course, I say that now looking back,
Looking
but
back,
at the
sure.
time, I was ready. Of course, I was
Right.
ready to take on this new
Absolutely.
role. I had everything I needed except
That's
for
right.
probably the ability. But what I'll say is, I had the right attitude, but that was about it. So this woman came in and she began to mentor me. She began to teach me the discipline of my work. And she really challenged me. And let me tell you, Stephanie, she worked me like a dog. I mean,
Wow.
I'm talking about 12-hour days
Mm,
became like what was the standard 8. But it
wow.
was 12, 14, sometimes 16-hour days just trying to meet her demands. She was a very demanding leader, but I was excited
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
work because I was learning
Because
and I
true
love
leaders
that.
inspire.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'll tell you that after she was there for a few months, she asked me to come into her office and close the door. And she says, I need to have a candid conversation with you. Well, when your boss says that to you, the feeling was not like, I'm going to get this job now. I'm thinking, this woman is going to fire me.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And
That's like
I
saying to your
start,
spouse, we need to talk.
yes, exactly. Nobody ever wants to hear that
That's
phrase.
right.
So I, of course, immediately started to get those, not, good feeling butterflies in my
Yeah.
stomach, but probably more equivalent to fighting bats in my stomach, where
Mm,
I was like, what is this woman going to say?
yeah.
So she was very candid, Stephanie. She said to me, I have been hired to fire you.
You're
I
kidding me.
said, I'm sorry, what?
How long had she been there?
She had been there about maybe 6 months.
Wow.
And I was floored. I mean, I think my mouth probably fell open. She probably could have thrown flies in there because my mouth was just
Wow.
open. I didn't know even what to say, much less I really could not believe what I was hearing.
Right.
So I
Absolutely.
said, I'm sorry, can you please repeat that? And she said, I've been hired to fire you.
Hmm.
And she went on to then explain the only problem is there is nothing about your performance or your attitude or what you've contributed to this organization that warrants you being fired.
Mm.
And I said, okay, at least I'm thinking we're on the same page here because
Right.
I'm like,
Right.
I've never been in a position
Wow.
where this was an issue. So, fast forwarding through the discussion, she basically kind of told me the backstory, which was upon the departure of my leader, there were some ideas about me
Hmm.
and not any questions that were raised to me directly, but there were ideas about me. And I think if you're a person of color in a workplace that mostly doesn't look like you,
Mm-hmm.
that everybody sort of knows that feeling of
Right. Right.
people make opinions about you
Right. That's right.
and and based on almost no merit.
Right.
Sometimes there's merit, but in this
Sure.
case, I'll say no merit that I was aware of.
Right.
So
Right.
um so what she then began to disclose to me is I had come to that role from the regulator. So one of the things that I think I was unaware of, and again, here's my naivety. I can never say that word right, but I assumed that they wanted me for the role because I knew what the regulatory body would be looking for. So, hey, here's somebody with an inside connection that
Right.
can really help get us to where we want it to be. Well, instead, what I learned from this leader was no, they did not trust you because they could not understand why the regulatory body spoke so highly of you.
What?
So I was like, what? Well, she later then disclosed to me that they thought I was a spy. And I
You're
said, what? And I'm thinking, okay, I don't work for the CIA.
right.
I don't work
Right.
for, the federal government. This is not some big FBI
Yeah.
sting type. Because I'm
Exactly.
thinking, am I on TV? Am I being punked? Like,
That's
this is weird. I don't get it. So, as a result, basically, the leader of this organization thought that maybe because they were doing things that were, let's put a politically correct word on it, shady,
Mhm.
that somehow they thought this regulatory body had gotten wind of this
Wow.
and had basically sent me over to internally investigate. Now, here's what I'll say to you, Stephanie. I'm not saying that that's never happened.
Right.
I'm not even going
Absolutely.
to say that it's never happened with the organization that I came from. Now, first of all, they didn't have a lot of money, so they weren't paying anybody to do anything extra.
Right.
But
Right.
what I'll say
Right.
is, they have definitely suggested that you be ears at a table and bring back some information, because it's like, people that maybe work for Walmart and Target who, hey, go peruse the aisles at Target to see what they're displaying, and we're
Right.
Walmart and we're competition. I mean, some of it is kind of the natural order of business,
Right. Absolutely.
and then some of it is a little bit beyond that.
Right.
So I keep saying fast forwarding because it's a long story, but basically, to make a long story short, which that always means it's going to get longer,
That's
right?
right.
But but what
Add a
I'll
couple
say
pages.
exactly, a few more hours, folks. No, I'm kidding. But so basically, what this leader told me was she introduced me to my very first example of politics that affected me.
Wow.
So here's my first lesson. In politics, not only happen in Washington, or not only happen, at your state legislative offices, but
Yep.
they happen in the workplace.
Absolutely.
So she then showed me a letter that she had written to the administration that basically said she was resigning her position
Oh my goodness.
because she could not live with herself with being put on this assignment any longer. Because what I learned from her was that they were starting to put the pressure on her, like, have you found something? Have you found something on her? Have you found something?
Wow.
We need her out of here. We need her out of here. We have no reason to terminate her, but we need her out of here because we don't trust her.
That is amazing.
And I'm thinking to myself, but I have done nothing, like
Yeah.
nothing. I mean, all of this has been cooked up in a kitchen at a different house that I've never been to, basically.
Yeah. Well, and this is a long time in, right? I mean,
Yes. Oh, yeah.
we're not
Where this,
talking 2 weeks. I mean,
no,
it's a
yeah.
long
So this is,
assignment that you were put on by the
yes,
CIA. So
exactly. Right. Exactly. So basically, she told me that she was resigning her position effective that same day,
wow.
and that she would give me a copy of the letter if need be, if things got to a place where I needed to file a lawsuit. So here I
Unbelievable.
am saying, lawsuit, job, I have bills to pay. I don't know what this is even about, and I just don't understand it. So that happened, it was probably about the middle of the year. So I would say it was maybe about June or so. So here I am facing, this leader who I loved, who I worked really
Mhm.
hard for, who, gave me some solid feedback. She says, look, Sabrina, you have deficiencies in this area, but it's solely because you just don't know.
Yeah.
She was like, but
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you this information that you don't know. She says, but there are no other performance issues, nothing. Like, everything that you should know, you do know. Everything that
Right.
you're doing correctly, and you're willing to learn, and you're teachable. Like, you're the
Which
ideal
is,
employee.
yes, exactly.
So anyway, she departed that same day. So at this point now, it's official. I have to take my jacket off and look for the target because it's clear that it's on my back. So at that point, I think is where my all of my lessons from my family in resiliency and how to
Mhm.
manage this very now hostile work environment, for lack of a
Right.
better way to say it. What am I going to do next? So, of course, in my head, my very first thought was, huh, she's leaving. Well, I'm going out of the door right behind her because
Right.
I'm not going to stay here. I don't have to take this poor treatment.
Right.
I can't believe these people have made up these stories about me. I'm out of here. Well, that attitude lasted about 10 minutes because I looked at my bank account and
Yeah.
quickly discovered I couldn't exit
Yeah.
stage left.
There was a need for a job. Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Last I checked, there was nobody around to pay the bills. And while I loved
Wow.
my parents, they were not wealthy people.
Yeah.
So what I'll
Wow.
say is that I didn't have anybody that could, do a quick transfer into my account to pay my bills. So
Right.
I knew I had to stay at least until I could find another opportunity. Well, I will tell you, that was the summer of basically, for lack of a better way to say it, summer of ice. When
Mm.
I tell you this entire organization iced me out,
Wow. That's
I,
amazing.
yeah, I could not get anyone to talk to me. It was very strange. I could not get any support for any projects. I could not get people to meet with me. People just started canceling meetings with me. People started just, I mean, abruptly not talking to me. And even my new leader that I got to replace, it was purely a formality because he
Wow.
never ever had time. And when
Wow.
he made time, it was kind of like a 30-minute, let me run through your task, pretend like I'm interested, and then move you out of my office.
That's
So
amazing.
it was the strangest thing. And after a while, it felt like I was in solitary confinement, in the sense that your mind starts to slip after a while.
Mhm.
And suddenly I found myself a few weeks later saying, well, I must have done something.
Yeah, you
You know,
start to
what?
question yourself.
Right. What is it? What did I do? Did I send the wrong email? Did I speak up at a meeting that I shouldn't have? Did I, incorrectly score somebody on an audit? Did I
Mhm.
give somebody the wrong feedback? I mean, I'm just going through my list of daily tasks. Like clearly something I've totally screwed up and
Right.
I have to think about what it is. But yet I couldn't find anything.
Hmm.
And I said, well, was I rude to somebody? Did I piss somebody off? I'm thinking all of these
Yeah.
things, but I could not find one source to where all of this could be coming from. But I'll tell you, I had a encounter with God. And I just say that
Yeah.
because I'm a Christian woman and
Yeah.
that's what I call him. But I had an encounter with God probably, in the middle of the night. I was awakened out of my sleep. And the one
Mm.
thing, Stephanie, you'll learn about me is that sleep, I am not a sleep disrupted person. Like when
Mm.
I hit the bed, I am passed out. So if I'm
Mhm.
being awakened in the night, there is a
There's a
major
reason.
problem.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
major
Yes.
problem.
And girl, when God wakes you up, that's it, right?
Yeah, you better wake up. You don't
That's
have a choice. So he woke me up and he tapped me on the shoulder and said, it's time for you to leave.
Mm.
And I said, that's nice, God. Who's going to pay these bills? Now, of course, I forgot who he was and how much
Right.
he had, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but I talked to him candidly and said, that's a nice thought, but who's
Yeah.
going to pay these bills? Are
That's
you
right.
crazy? So I noticed the next week, same thing, middle of the night, jarring wake up.
Wow.
I said that you need to leave. And then I noticed he got a little more aggressive
Mm.
as the time went
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
And it was basically, I have you and I need you to leave.
Wow.
And, in typical Sabrina fashion, I ignored him and said,
Yeah, that's when you get a Holy Spirit scolding, is what you
yes, exactly. So he apparently needed to do what I find even to this date sometimes happens to me, which is when I have a major change that's coming, I need to go away so that I can gain some clarity and I can truly hear.
Yeah.
because what ends up happening is my own thoughts will wrestle down the thoughts of God and kind of run over them,
All that
try to.
noise. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. That's what it becomes, noise
Right.
in my head. So that summer, my nephew was running at a nationals track meet. My brother called me up and says, "Hey, look, I'm really busy. I'm not going to be able to take him this year. Would you mind taking him down to Houston to the track meet?" Thinking, I don't have any time to do that. That means that's like 10 days and I have to take off from work and these people already hate me and I don't need to be away. And what am I going to do? And I don't have any money. And who wants to hang out with a stinky teenage boy for, days? And sit out in has anybody thought about Texas in the summertime? Like it's hot.
Yeah.
Like I don't, and sitting out at them hot track meets, I was like, I'm not interested. But my brother just like pleaded with me, please, Sabrina, can you do this for me? And I thought about my little sweet pumpkin head nephew and said, okay. So we planned this trip to Houston. And of course, once I'm in, I'm in. So I'm all
Right.
the way
Right.
excited. I now have this agenda. We can sightsee, we can do this. In between the heat, we can cool
Yes.
off and these various things. We can eat at these places and all of that. So anyway, I planned this trip. And while I'm down in Houston, I call up a couple of friends that live in the state of Texas and said, "Hey, I'm going to be in Houston for the week. If you happen to be nearby, why don't you come by and see me?" So a couple of girlfriends did just that. They came up to Houston and saw me. And it was weird. I found myself having this discussion with them about a move.
Hmm.
And they were like, "You should move down here. Texas is great. You should consider it. It's a nice place."
Wow.
And I was thinking, I'm not moving. Who wants to move? Have you heard about the politics in Texas? It's hot. And let me tell you, this was an oppressively hot summer
Wow.
that
Of
week
course it
that we were
was.
there. Of
Right.
course. So I was like, that's a nice thought, but I'm not doing that. And, we won't even factor in the fact that I had just broken off an engagement a few months before. So
Oh
I was
my
already pretty
gosh.
miserable to begin
Yeah.
with. So running away from home started to be more and more appealing.
Right.
That
Right. Absolutely.
job that hates me, they want to fire me. I have a relationship that's ended that I thought was going somewhere far. And it was just, my life was in shambles,
Yeah.
basically. I had 3 jobs at the time, none of which were paying me adequately, including the one that I was the target on my back. I just was like,
Wow.
this is an awful place to be. And I just need to run away from home. So I did what I've been taught by my very resilient parents, which was you need to come up with a plan.
Mm.
So I said, okay, let me think about what this plan is going to look like. And I said a very simple prayer when I boarded the plane to return to my home after the week-long track meet. And I said, okay, well, I'm taking off, I'm praying for traveling mercies. I said, but more importantly, when the wheels of this plane touched down in the city that I was headed to, I said, if you give me the peace that
Mm.
transcends all understanding, then I will follow you.
Mm.
And literally, it was the smoothest landing I've ever had on a plane.
Wow.
And I fly a lot. And literally, I felt like I was being washed over in
Wow.
peace. And I landed on a Saturday. Monday, I submitted my resignation.
Oh my gosh. I have chills just listening to that.
Oh, yeah. And let me tell you, Stephanie, I had no job. I
Mm.
had nowhere to live. All I had was a conversation with a friend who
Mm-hmm.
said, "Hey, if you decide to come down here, I have a big house. It's just me and my son. I have 4 bedrooms. You're welcome to stay. If you like it, stay for a while. If you don't like it, go back home."
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, who says that? And I don't have a job, and this woman has lost her mind, and suppose I can't find a job, and how's she going to feed me and her son, and she has this house. And I was just thinking this whole thing is just crazy.
Wow.
But what was even more entertaining is that as word spread at the job that I was leaving, because at the time in my position, I had to give not 2 weeks notice, I had to give 4 weeks
Oh,
mandatory notice.
okay. Let me understand this. You're a spy. They want you
Yes.
out. But you have to give 4 weeks notice. Okay.
Yes,
Got it.
because I led a team. So
Okay.
I had to prepare the team accordingly.
Wow.
And when I tell you, I ended up giving them about 6 weeks notice,
Wow.
but they worked me to the bone for those 6 weeks, because what they quickly figured out is, oh boy, this woman is holding up a good portion of the organization. So if she departs with no
Yeah.
knowledge,
Yeah.
and takes her knowledge with us, we're going to be in trouble.
Right. Exactly.
So what was most interesting is, again, I described that piece to you that I had. And one of the things that God had whispered in my spirit is, it's not for you to share where you're going or what your plan is. Just know that you're leaving. So then I came up with this really cute catchphrase, as people would say, oh my gosh, where are you going? I heard you're leaving. And I started to say, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to lead a life of leisure.
Oh, wow.
And somehow it didn't go over that well, especially not with the executive team. And in particular, I knew things were getting bad when I was, quote unquote, sent for by the chief of HR.
Wow.
And said, I heard you were leaving. Where are you going? Because
You're
in her
kidding
mind,
me.
she thought, well, surely you're not going to not tell me where you're going. But I'll tell you, the city that I was coming from was very much a highly political, high touch city where, Stephanie, if you said, I'm going to, to the Olson Institute to work, they're calling over there to say, Stephanie, I understand Stephanie's coming to work for you. And they would not give you their blessing. I'll just say that.
Kidding me.
Oh yeah. It was, and I had seen it happen over and over again.
Wow.
So she, I guess, thought in her threatening / bullying way that I was going to surrender to her. And I said, well, actually, I've decided I don't have a place that I'm going yet. I said, and I'm just going to lead a life of leisure for a while. I said, because, I just need a break. And her eyes got really big and says, no, but like, where are you going to work? So,
wow.
And I
Pretty
said,
sure I just answered that.
right. And I said, I'm not. And she just kind of looked, because at this point, people are doing their calculation of what they are assessing you to be at.
Yes.
In that moment. So she kind of looked me up and down. And I know her thinking was, or if I could assume what she was thinking.
Right.
Well, you're not married. You don't have any kids.
Yeah.
And you're not rich. So what are you going to do?
Support you. Right.
Right. I'm sure that's what she was thinking, even though she didn't say it. But anyway, so I rolled out my 6 weeks, and let me tell you, I thought people weren't talking to me before. Wow. Oh, once that news spread, I swear people got off the elevator when I got on. Like it was the craziest experience I had ever had, even to this date.
Wow.
But I'll tell you what I prayed for when I knew I had those like next 5 weeks to go with having to deal with this, is that I prayed for peace each and every day. And I said, I'm going to do my job to its fullest. Yeah. I'm not going to allow the attitudes or whatever is going on with the people here to disturb, what's next for me. So I dug deep, I dug on the inside. And before I even knew really what meditation was, I found myself meditating daily as I went, headed into work, and really praying and talking to supportive friends to get me through. Yeah. I took a lot of walks during that period, stuff I would never do because I couldn't leave my desk. I worked too hard. Right. But I started going out for lunch. I started taking walks during my lunch. I got fresh air. I stood up. I stretched in my office. Yep. I took care of myself during those 6 weeks because I was on the battlefield at that point. Yeah. And I needed to protect myself and really armor myself up to deal with the environment that I was in. But one of the things I thought about is how many of the people that look like me, or even other people who were on this journey before me, what they had to go through.
Right. Absolutely.
And here I am, able to take care of myself. I lived in a decent place, I was able to sustain myself. I had a car. I was able, I had my basic needs met without incident. And all I was dealing with technically at the time was an attitudinal company that sort of hated me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but those 5 weeks, I'll tell you, they weren't easy.
which is
But when
overwhelming. Yeah.
that's exactly the word I was going to use, Stephanie. As I got overwhelmed, I just would take a second,
Mm.
I would breathe, I would just reconnect with the creator, and I would
Mhm.
just keep going.
Wow.
And to this date, I've continued, and that was probably 10 years ago that
Wow.
that happened. And I've been in Texas ever since.
That's
And that's where I
amazing.
am today. And really, I think I leaned on the lessons learned
Yeah.
from the people that I loved, and also too, just from reading. And in this day and age, obviously, we have podcasts, we have,
Mhm.
you know, stories online, we have snippets of, sound bites that we can
Right.
hear that help kind of push you to the next level or push you through the next hour in some
Right.
cases.
Yes.
But really, I think it was those early years of my parents, watching them fall down and get back up,
Mhm.
watching them, deal with controversy and getting back up.
Yeah.
But also teaching me that no matter what other people think about me,
Right.
I am still important. I
Yes.
am still admirable. I still can always rely on myself to create the reputation I want for myself.
Mm. Mhm.
And that's really, my one of my many, I would say, resilient stories,
I
Stephanie.
love that. You know what I love about that story too is that, and this is a huge takeaway, that everything you did with integrity. And I think
Yes.
that is so important. A lot of times when we're treated poorly, or I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's a huge slap in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And our response, I think our initial human response is, well, I'm not going to be treated like that. And I'm going to,
Yep.
whatever. But the, the walk of, or the walk in integrity is
Mm-hmm.
so important to the next steps. And
Yes.
you were able to really leave with integrity. And then I have a friend who always says, when you do the right things will happen. And
Yes.
I think that's, just part of God saying, yeah, this is my will, but hey, things are going to happen. And if you
Mm-hmm.
do it with, the character of God,
Mm-hmm.
it's good.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
I love
Definitely.
I love that.
Yep.
So do you, I'm just dying to, and there was another thing that really caught me in this entire story was being teachable.
Mm-hmm.
That is so critical. Do you know where your leader that left because she didn't appreciate the assignment went? Do you know anything about that?
What's so funny, Stephanie, is sometimes I now even wonder if she wasn't an angel. I cannot
Oh,
find her
wow.
anywhere.
Seriously.
I have looked for her on all the social media platforms. I've looked for her. I've Googled her. I mean, come on, Google knows
Wow.
where
Yeah,
people
everybody
that
is.
live in the woods are. I cannot find her anywhere.
It's
Nowhere.
amazing. That is
Yeah,
amazing. Wow.
I
So
have tried.
so today you are a psychologist. Tell us a little bit about that journey into Texas and now what you're
Yeah.
doing.
So, once I got to Texas, I was fortunate that I did get a job right away. I went to work for the city of San Antonio government. So I ran their public health quality department. I actually established kind of their first quality department. And then
Not
from
as
there,
a spy.
right, not
Yeah.
as a spy.
Okay. Okay. Just
Right.
checking. Just checking.
Yes, exactly. I hung up my spy shoes when
Okay.
I left that last
Okay.
place, which I didn't know I even had,
Yeah,
but
well,
yes. And so, from there, I transitioned sort of back into the health plan world. And I spent, probably close to 5 years at my next health plan. And from there, I transitioned to my latest health plan that I spent the last year working for. And now I'll tell you, over the time, I've been developing what I call sidebar skills along the way.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I had finished my doctorate in 2011, right before I decided to move to Texas. Now, granted, that was a long, long journey. So we won't say when I
Yes,
started,
that
but
is a
we'll just
long
say that I
journey.
finished.
Yes, congratulations.
Right. So I did finish. So, with that, I've always kept my foot sort of in the clinical realm in some way.
Mhm.
Right now, or lately, I've been doing some coaching pretty much since I've been in Texas. I have some logistic kind of stuff that I'm still working on to kind of resolve. I don't know that I'll ever return to full time clinical practice. It
Yeah.
was very stressful,
Mhm.
and the amount of self-care that's needed to maintain that work full time, I will just say for me was more than I wanted to invest,
Yeah.
because I would have needed to live a life of leisure to have that job full time
Yeah. Yeah,
some ways.
absolutely.
So shout out to and appreciations to those
Yeah,
people that are able to do that work full time.
absolutely.
um, but I'll tell you that, I still participate with the American Psychological Association. I still have done some trainings, and I do different. I'm still in the field
Yes.
operating. And I actually spun off into what would be deemed as more like consulting psychology,
Mhm.
which is the work that I did at the health plans and even at
Right.
the city of San Antonio. Is kind of a spinoff of that world of industrial organizational psychology mixed with consulting psychology. So
Yeah.
still in the discipline, just not necessarily in the clinical arm of the discipline to the same extent that I was. But so that part will never leave me. It
Mhm.
truly is a gift. That part is not work for me, it's who I am.
Right.
I'll tell you, it sometimes can be troublesome, because I've had more than one time friends and family say, I'm not your patient or I'm not your client.
That
And
yep.
I'm like, yeah, but sometimes, the problem with this gift is you can see things that other people can't
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
So I have to sometimes put socks in my mouth. I'm not always good at it, but I'm like, you do know that if you go down that road, it's going to be a disaster. Let me tell you why. But
That
then I have to
is
remember everything is not my business, and that
Hmm.
we all in lessons are better learned kind of in the natural consequences.
Yeah,
And that's something that I've
absolutely.
learned, I think, over the years, just for myself, but even in the work, I've
Right.
learned that as well.
Right.
That sometimes you just have to kind of let people make their own choices. And then from there, it's a little easier to learn from choices or mistakes that you made, as opposed to something you were warned about. So,
It really is. And that's why when we tell our children 500 times, this is why they shouldn't do it, they don't actually realize it until they experience it or somebody else
yes.
tells them.
Well, that's always much easier. Then it's worth
That's right.
doing,
That's
right?
right.
If somebody else tells them.
That's right.
Yes, exactly.
So, what would you tell people who are, because I think so many people are in situations, I don't think, I have never heard a story like that. So, I can't
Hmm.
imagine a lot of people are in situations exactly like yours, but
Hmm.
certainly in situations where they feel they're treated unfairly at work. They
Hmm.
have a boss who is just um, not encouraging, not empowering, not helpful, whatever it may
Hmm.
be. And I heard someone say the other day that the majority of people just hate their work. And
Hmm.
I don't know if that's true or not, but what would you tell people who are in that position?
I think you raise a good question. And the first thing that comes to mind, and this is really separating out the emotion of it all, is document, document, document.
Mhm, mhm.
And sometimes I think, while there's these personal recommendations when you're having emotional struggles to use a journal, but I also think that a work journal is important.
That's good.
And when I say that, having some place that you can document incidents that are occurring. Because one of the things is that if your situation at work does get to a place where you think you need to file a complaint,
Mhm.
um, the first thing anyone in human resources is going to ask you for is, well, how do I know that what you're saying is correct?
Right.
What documentation do you have? Are there emails? Are there recordings? Has someone else heard you, overheard these,
Right.
inappropriate questions or responses that you're referring to? So I think documentation is good for both the negative things happening at work and the positive things happening. Because I'll tell you, most people, when it's time for performance evaluations, your leader can't tell you what you've done. Because
Right.
especially if they have more than one person that they're
Right.
supervising.
Right.
So that also helps, like, hey, I knocked out this, presentation, I knocked it out of the park. And these 5 people said these things. Document those. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the year, when it's time to do your performance evaluation, you have these 10 or 12 items that maybe you captured during the year. There were great accomplishments that simply your leader forgot about.
Be your own
Or,
advocate.
yes.
Yes.
So there's that. And then obviously the negative incidents, as those occur, date and time, who, who observed, what was said. I'm not suggesting that you have to go around recording stuff on your phone.
Mhm.
However, if we haven't seen anything in the political climate of this country over
Mhm.
the last several years, if it were not for these documented recordings, there
Mhm.
would be a lot of injustices that went unknown
Mhm.
or that were not addressed or dealt with because people did not, because people did take the time to videotape. So,
Right. Right.
that's on you, however you decide. I'm not sure where you work. There's some workplaces
Yeah.
that have
Do it
laws about
legally.
that.
Do it right.
Yes. I was just going to
Absolutely.
say that have laws. So understand what the policy is of your workplace and
Right.
whether or not that can be done. But definitely a written documentation is a good thing to have. Because
Yeah.
also too, I mean, everybody pretty much knows the further you get from an incident, the less you remember about it.
Mhm.
So if you're able to write down what occurred, within a day or two of the moment, you know, then you're probably going to remember the most that you'll ever remember about that
Absolutely.
incident.
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
6 months later, after something happened,
Things get
you may
fuzzy.
remember, right, exactly. You have no idea. So I would recommend that. I would also recommend, obviously, ongoing self care. Because the other thing, too, is that I think sometimes our views and how we hear and receive things are altered when we are upset anyway. We may have
Absolutely.
stressors at home. We may be hungry. We may be tired.
Yep.
We may be, stressed by something, at work already that may have
Absolutely.
nothing to
Right.
do with the current incident. And let's be clear, when you have all of that on you, things are just worse. I mean,
Right.
think about it. If you're tired, hungry, and frustrated and you get into traffic, the likelihood of you blowing your horn and cursing is much greater
That's
than
right.
if
That's
you're
right.
rested and not hungry and you just had a good time hanging out with family or friends and you're driving home and it's like somebody cuts me off. It's like, oh, it's all right.
Right. Well, that is so true for so many things. And I think being aware of those things are so
Yes.
critical. Recognize when you're not feeling good. Recognize when, okay, now I should probably eat because I'm about to get
Yes.
hangry,
Yes. Hmm.
recognize those times when, okay, I might be reacting a little bit sensitively. That's not it. Is
Yes.
that a word? So
Hmm.
little bit too sensitively to this because I'm feeling da 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 da. Those are
Yes.
all so important. The self-awareness, I think, is so critical.
Yes, it's definitely key. So I would definitely suggest doing things like that. And, talk to trusted friends because I always say that we don't always know our own, and I'll use this word loosely, but crazy in our head.
I like
Because
that.
in our own head, our own crazy sounds completely fine
Yep.
because we're in our own head. And my favorite is pay attention to the looks around the people that are listening to your story. And if they're all like, as you're saying something, then probably your perception might be a little off.
Yeah,
But if everybody's
absolutely.
like, yeah, you're right, then it's like, and I know people, particularly adults, like to say, well, the opinions of other people don't matter, or, I know what I'm doing, or, I've been in my body this whole time. Nobody can tell me how I should feel. I mean, I
Mhm.
get all of that. But I also think that, that's why God did not keep us as a party of one with Adam. I
That's right.
mean, he gave
That's
us more
right.
people to get an audience to some of our foolishness.
That's
So,
right. Well, and that goes back to being teachable. I mean, if
yes.
we are not willing to accept we could be wrong in a situation,
Now,
that's a
mostly
problem.
not me,
Well,
Stephanie,
I'm
but
not talking
others.
about you. No,
Right.
that's right. That's right.
Exactly. Ask my spouse, family, friends, all of that. I'm never the one. Right.
That's right. That's
Right.
totally different. But everybody
Yes.
else, you know,
Yes.
I mean,
Hmm.
and that's I think that's what I see so often in the workplace that starts to get kind of kind of I don't know, unsettling is
Hmm.
when somebody is not willing to say, okay, yeah, maybe I don't know everything.
Hmm.
Maybe I don't have all the answers. And being willing to say, I could learn here. And that
Hmm.
is why it's so important to have solid support systems around you, wise counsel around you.
Yes.
And that may not be somebody at work.
Exactly.
And that's
Yep.
okay. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And then, people that are close to you, or if you talk to on a regular basis, they can sometimes help us see our blind spots because
Yes.
we all have them. And
Yes.
it's just a matter of, sometimes there are gaps. And I always think about this young lady that I've worked with quite a bit. And I remember that I would, someone would ask a question in a meeting, and, I immediately, as the leader of the team, would stand up and give my proclamation of what's right. And she would tap me on the shoulder and say, "That's actually, you misquoted the regulations," or whatever. And I would be like, uh, uh, but guess
Dang
what? I
it.
knew she was right
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
trusted her. My experience with her is that if she's going to speak up, she's going to be 100%
right.
right. So guess what I did as what I think to be a good leader, which is I said, "You know what? I think you're correct.
Yep,
Thank you so much for correcting me." And I didn't show offense to it.
that's
I
right,
just said, "Thank you. I appreciate. Let's clarify." And then I would reiterate
right.
what she said as being the truth,
I
as
love
opposed
that.
to I had a brain slip.
Yep,
We all have them.
we're human. That's our
Hmm.
problem. Yes,
Yes.
it's that whole human thing that
Right.
we
It
gotta get
gets in
rid
the way.
of.
Yes.
That is so good. I just love that. And I think, and I'd love to have more of these conversations because I know you've got stories upon, maybe you could just be my regular guest, like Dr. Phil was on Oprah.
Yes,
That could
exactly.
be.
Exactly. Yes, I love that. I love
Because
that.
I think those stories of resilience are so important, and you said it, it's just getting back up. Your parents were resilient because when they were down, they just got back up.
Got back up. Yep.
And that's what it's all about. It's not about arriving, it's not about being like this is it. It's about
Right.
getting back up when you fall down.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh,
And know that you're going to continue to fall down, and that's okay.
that's exactly right. I love that.
Hmm.
Okay, this has been good. How can people find you?
Well, you can drive to my home if you have money. I'm kidding. I'm not really.
And it looks
But
like
what
a
I would,
beautiful home behind you, let me tell you.
yes,
That's what
thank you. Thank you so much. I've worked so hard to find this virtual background. So, what I tell you is don't look in my office right now because you might find all sorts of odd things. But you can find me on the traditional social media platforms under Sabrina Kuhn on LinkedIn is kind of my preferred connection point. I do a lot of activity there. But I also, if I may, Stephanie, take this time to talk about my own podcast, which I'd like to have you on.
I'd love that.
Yes, so I am on a podcast with another psychologist, Dr. Tombaquee Bailey, and we have a collective podcast called She's Always Right and He's Never Wrong.
I love that
So,
title.
and you know who's always right,
I
right?
do.
The
I
two,
do.
yes,
I do.
exactly. Now he may disagree, but he's
That's
irrelevant
neither
to
here
the
nor there,
discussion,
right?
right? But you can find us there, and we are on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under She's Always Right, He's Never Wrong. So a really long email address is She's Always Right, He's Never Wrong at gmail.com. We are working on a website. It is not up and running yet. It's under construction, but we also do have a very small YouTube channel now that we are hoping to build out this coming year. So look for us there. But definitely all of those places are key and important. And then I'll give also my personal email address, just kind of for what I call the larger masses. Anything kind of can get directly to me on that. And that is Sabrina.A.Townsend, which is my maiden name, at gmail.com. Again, Sabrina.A.Townsend at gmail.com. Happy to receive emails from folks. Happy to have people send me notes on LinkedIn. And then, like I said, through the podcast as well.
And I'll have all those links on the comment section. So tell us a little bit about your life coaching. Did I say that right, or is it just coaching? It's all the coaching.
Yeah, I would say life coaching is definitely probably the preference. I'll tell you that right now in my coaching practice, I see primarily women right now, but I typically see women in couples. I have done some men coaching as well over the years, but that's just kind of, I would say, who's in the seats today.
Yes. Yeah.
But with that, because I'm a trained psychologist, I tell people the difference between coaching and traditional psychotherapy is I'm a little more in your business in the coaching. So with traditional psychotherapy, typically, I'm putting you on the highway, but I'm letting you drive. I'm riding behind you, but I'm letting you drive. Coaching, I'm in the seat beside you and I'm elbowing you when you make the wrong turn.
I love that. You're like a GPS.
Yes, exactly. Except for I typically don't get you lost sometimes, like the GPS does.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that.
I'm always accepting new clients. I keep that pretty small, but mostly because I will say, shout out to the clients that I work with, but they typically don't go away probably as soon as they should. So I don't have a lot of slot because people tend to come and stay. So
yeah, good. That's awesome.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, this has been great. I have really enjoyed my time with you. You're going to see a lot more of us talking, having conversations.
The dynamic duo.
Yes, we are. Yes. S&S. That's who we
are. Yes, exactly.
I love it. Sabrina, thank you so much. And we will put all of those links and make them available to you. And thank you for being a part of the Being Resilient podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please share with anyone you think will benefit from this podcast.